All right, we are live.
All right. We call to order the meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission for Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. Before roll call, our Assistant City Attorney, Ms. Poon, has some words of wisdom regarding our current predicament on Zoom meetings. Ms. Poon.
Thank you, Chair Wallace. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. The executive orders authorize this planning commission to hold public meetings by teleconference during the COVID-19 crisis. I previously went over the specific provisions of the Brown Act that have been temporarily amended or suspended in order to allow for this meeting to take place by teleconference. And this meeting will comply with all such provisions. Madam Recording Secretary, it would now be appropriate for you to conduct roll call, after which I would ask the chair to recognize me in order to confirm certain matters for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Item 2 is roll call. Commissioner Alpert?
Here.
Commissioner Frank?
Here.
Commissioner Marks?
Here.
Vice Chair Kuznick?
Here.
And Chair Wallace.
I'm here. Thank you. Now, Ms. Poon, back to you.
Thank you again, Chair Wallace. I would now like to ask the chair, the vice chair, and the other commission members 3 questions. Rather than ask you to respond separately to these questions, I'll ask all 3. And if the answer is yes to all 3, please say yes and physically raise your hand. Question number 1, can you hear me well? Question number 2, have you been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, clearly? And question 3, are you satisfied, based on facial or voice recognition or otherwise, that everyone here representing themselves to be a commission member is actually the person they are representing themselves to be? So I am looking for hands and yeses.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you. Seeing all hands raised, the record should reflect that I have received affirmative answers from each commission member present to all 3 questions, that all commission members have indicated that they are able to hear each other and these proceedings clearly. And no commission member has expressed doubt that each and every commission member participating by teleconference is in fact the commission member they are representing themselves to be. And finally, I would now like to advise the chair and the commission members and the recording secretary that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
To the flag.
of the United
United
States
States of America.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Nation.
under God,
God.
indivisible,
with
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you. Item number 4 on our agenda tonight is public comment. This is for public comment on matters that are not on the agenda for tonight. Ms. Shaw, could you advise the public of the ground rules for public comment?
If you wish to speak under public comment, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak when public comment is being taken. At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any item not already included in tonight's agenda.
Do we have any hands raised?
We do not have any hands raised.
Okay, I'm going to close public comment on item number 4. Item number 5 is additions and revisions. We have none. Item 6 is the consent calendar. Item 6.1 is the City of San Ramon draft fiscal year CIP. And I'd like to have someone make a motion to approve and pass on to the City Council the CIP.
So moved.
I will second the motion.
Okay, we have a roll call.
We have mover Commissioner Frank,
Yes.
seconder Vice Chair Kuznick,
Yes.
Commissioner Alpert,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
and Chair Wallace.
Aye.
With that, this item is approved 5-0.
Item 7 is approval of the minutes. Item 7.1 is approval of the minutes from our regular meeting on April 20, 2021. Do any of the commissioners have any changes, corrections, or comments?
I'll move approval of minutes from April 20th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and second to approve the minutes from the April 20th, 2021 meeting. Could we have a roll call, please?
We have mover Alpert,
Yes.
seconder Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
and then Commissioner Franks,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kuznick,
Yes.
Chair Wallace.
Aye.
Item 7.1 passes 5-0.
Okay, item number 8 is continued items after closing a public hearing. We have none. Item number 9 is continued items, open public hearing. We have none. Item 10, public hearing, new items. We have none. Item number 11, non-public hearing action items. We have none. And item number 12, study sessions, commissioner liaison reports, and staff reports. Item 12.1 tonight, the economic development overview presented by our deputy city attorney. So, sir, you have the floor.
Good evening. I believe I'm presenting the economic development overview. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Can everybody see that okay?
I think we're good.
All right. Well, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Steven Spadowski. I'm the Deputy City Manager, and I'm also the Economic Development Director for the City of San Ramon. Tonight, I have an economic development overview. It's a presentation that I give to various groups, kind of a whirlwind tour of everything that you wanted to know about sales tax and then some. So I will be covering some of the basics and going into details in some areas. Feel free to stop me at any point. Sometimes I get the snowball rolling downhill and it builds up speed and go a little bit faster than intended. So if you have any questions at any point, feel free to just go ahead and chime on in. Let me make sure this is working. This evening, I'll go over the sales tax revenue generated, how we generate sales tax in the city, challenges that are specific to San Ramon, and economic development strategies. And normally when I present this to a group of 50 or so people in a room, I start out by asking, what is the number one request that we receive for retail? You know, over 20 years in San Ramon, this is the number one restaurant or location that we always hear. And inevitably, when I ask that, somebody shouts out from the audience, they want an Olive Garden. I don't know if it's the breadsticks or if it's the commercials. We always get the Olive Garden question. So, they will ask us, or they will say, hey, the city needs to convince Olive Garden to open a restaurant here. But full well that we don't have that power. I wish we did to be able to say, yes, we want you to open a retail location in San Ramon, but it really takes three things. You have to have a willing property owner that will either lease or sell the land to the retail location. The city has to have that area properly zoned for that service. And the business, they have their own set of metrics. So they put a pin on their GIS map and it tells them whether or not that is a viable location. And once you have all things, that's when you would get your Olive Garden and your delicious breadsticks. So moving on to sales tax generated, I'll go over the tax rates, our rate breakdown, revenue breakdown, comparison with other cities, online sales tax, and just briefly talk about the top 25 generators in San Ramon. So sales tax, as an overview, it's a major source of discretionary funds for the city. It's about $10 million a year, and I'll go over how that's generated. But our discretionary funding source of the city is the general fund, which is at about $60 million right now of our $120 million budget. It's a significant source of funding for infrastructure, and the revenue can fluctuate due to market conditions and consumer trends. And it's typically the second highest source of revenue for cities, right behind property tax. There are some cities in the TriValley where their sales tax is above the property tax, but San Ramon, we're typically higher in the property tax. So the sales tax rate, Contra Costa County sales tax rate is 8.25%. Rates can vary across California and within counties. El Cerrito is currently the highest in Contra Costa County at 9.75%. In the state of California, Santa Fe Springs in LA County is the highest at 10.5 currently. And as I stated below, we are at the Contra Costa County sales tax rate of 8.25%. If you look at the sales tax breakdown, so of that 8.25%, 6.25 goes towards the state, half cent goes to county health, another half cent to CCTA, and finally 1% of that 8.25 goes to the city when somebody purchases something within our borders. Moving on to the overall percentage of our revenue, our sales tax is roughly 18% and property tax is roughly 40% of our discretionary revenue. We have other categories, charges for services, transfers from other accounts, franchise fees, TOT tax, which we'll go into a little bit later. With COVID, the hotels were hit pretty hard. So our TOT tax was one of the revenue sources that really dropped. And this is a look at our last 5 years adopted budgets. And you can see up at the top, our property tax has grown steadily. Our sales tax has hovered around that 10 million mark. And the 2021 adopted, the sales tax actually came in a little bit higher at that 10 million range. We do have a property transfer tax that we charge when homes are sold, the TOT tax that I mentioned with the hotels, franchise fees, license and permits, and so on and so on. With the, I'll get into that later, the economic downturn, but with the TOT tax, it actually dropped at about 1.3 million from our adopted budget from fiscal year 1920. And many of the numbers that I'm going to show tonight are 2019 numbers. I wanted to show what it was like when it was normal before COVID hit and everything kind of went a little cattywampus. Some of our top sales tax generators in San Ramon. Again, I won't go through this list in its entirety, but if you see Chevron or Shell or Safeway Fuel, that's of course gas sales. Canary Marketing's an interesting one. They are a marketing firm over at Bishop Branch, and they provide marketing services for agencies like FIFA. So it's a major, marketing push. When they get that business-to-business sale, we do see a good spike from those sales. And then we have Heller Jewelers. They're doing very well over there at the city center. And then there are also companies that I'd like to point out, like CTI Control Tech and Oak Knight Company. There are certain business-to-business sellers. They either sell wiring or pipe fittings and pumps, and this is their point of sale for usually region-wide. So they do bring in quite a bit of revenue to the city. And then also you have your classics like Target and Home Depot, and of course In-N-Out Burger with that large line on San Ramon Valley Boulevard most days. Now, one item that has really risen to the forefront recently, in particular with COVID, is online sales tax and the county pool. And this is how online sales tax works. So online sales tax revenue goes towards a county pool, and it's primarily from two sources right now, Amazon and DMV. Those are the top two online sales generators for the pool. Money is then distributed based on a percentage of sales tax countywide. So what they do is they take our physical location sales tax percentage on a countywide basis, which we are now roughly 5% of the total sales tax generated in the county. And then whatever that percentage is, that's the percentage of the separate pool that we receive in terms of revenue. So that's roughly right now 2 million of our 10 million in sales tax every year. And sometimes I go through this a little quick, so I created a chart to explain it, reiterating that on the left, you have our total percentage of the county sales tax pool. And then in a separate pool, there's the online sales tax pool, and that generates the actual revenue. So I know it's a very simple chart, but sometimes I go through the explanation pretty quick, and that's how we end up with our 2 million a year in online sales tax. So to compare us prior to COVID with other cities in the Tri-Valley, here we are in 2019 at roughly 10 million. If you move to the city of Pleasanton, they generated 22 million. Dublin was at 26 million in 2019. And then you have Livermore at 36 million. And then I did include Danville there down below us at 6 million. And this is primarily, and we'll get into this later in the presentation, it's representative of our retail space and what offerings we have here in San Ramon. Livermore has an outlet mall, multiple car dealerships. Dublin has that very large retail section along 580. So does Pleasanton along 580 and 680, and they have the Stone Ridge Mall. So we just don't have some of the larger tax generators, but what we do have is that we have a very broad tax base. We don't rely on any one particular sector. So when we do have spikes in revenue, they're relatively minor, either up or down. So at least we know what we're going to get. I know in 2008, during the economic downturn, I believe it was Livermore, they had a $14 million dip. The recent COVID dip for the city of Walnut Creek, which is heavily reliant on their downtown, I believe at one point they were projecting that they were going to get 10 million over their projections because they were doing so well. And then COVID hit and they adjusted that to 10 million below their projections. So they had a $20 million swing. And typically when cities have that large of a fluctuation, you're looking at major changes to city services and staff. So moving on, next we have some of the challenges. Cities in California, we face significant challenges with tax revenue generation. And San Ramon, we have a few added challenges based on various factors. First, we'll move to location. And one of our challenges, as you can see here, we are smack dab in the middle of two major retail hubs or sites. So people typically drive north up to Walnut Creek to go shopping or down south to Dublin. We are, again, smack dab in the middle. So we really rely on what freeway presence we do have when people are driving between those two locations to kind of see what's going on and hopefully stop and shop in our area. And then another challenge, I always highlight our retail centers. If you're familiar with this map, it shows all of the retail centers in San Ramon. If I were to play a game of SimCity and completely wipe the San Ramon map clear of all zoning and all structures, typically you wouldn't lay out a city in this fashion. You would center the corridor along 680 as your major retail area for that freeway visibility and easy on and off ramp access. But this is how we shaped up. It was a bedroom community of the county, and then we annexed or incorporated in 83, and we've been doing the best with what we've had. So I'll get into it a little bit later on with the retail gravity, but you can see just from the locations of our centers, the intersection of Crow and 680 and also Bollinger, and then El Costa a little bit down to the south are our major locations for retail. And then getting into retail gravity. It is the basically it's almost like the flow of water of people going to shopping centers and where they're located. That's why the majority of the time you want them located within easy access to the freeway so people can get on and off on their way to home. Retail centers like the one out in Doherty Valley, they're always going to have a little bit of an issue with attracting people from off the freeway because in today's terms, that's a bit of a drive from the freeway. So typically they're centered around your major intersections. So we do experience, and I'll talk about this report a little bit later when we did a 2018 study, some residential leakage in San Ramon. And we do have more detailed breakdowns of particular sectors, but this gives you a general idea of one of the issues that we do face in San Ramon is residents shopping elsewhere. And you can see at the top, we do keep people with materials and garden and supplies. That's mostly Home Depot and now Ace. And people are, for the better part, filling up in San Ramon and not driving elsewhere for gas. So that's a positive. And then everything else we do experience to one degree or another, people shopping in other communities. And you can see the most drastic example is the motor vehicle parts and dealers, since we do not have any new vehicle dealerships in town. I believe general merchandise stores has improved, in particular with the city center opening. So moving on to sales tax erosion, we are experiencing over time this sales tax erosion. It's basically a shifting of purchasing habits from experience-based versus material goods. People are spending more money. They're not buying the coffee makers and the cappuccino machines to make it at home. They're going to Starbucks for the experience of somebody else making the coffee for you and then sitting down in a nice area and drinking that coffee. We're also seeing e-commerce, as you know, has really taken off, in particular with COVID, and that has replaced a lot of the taxable sales, and we have to rely on that county tax pool. In 2019, there was a wave of store closures even before COVID, where retailers were closing around 6,000 stores in 2019 versus opening of about half that, a little less than half. And then there's been a lot of spending growth in other categories in housing, healthcare, and education. As those costs rise, people have less disposable income. We also have to deal with California having the highest tax rate, but the narrowest base. So our California tax rate is up to 10%, as I described earlier, but it's only on about 27% of the base goods purchased, where if you compare that to Hawaii, they're 4%, but they tax virtually everything. A few months ago, I looked up what's exempt from sales tax on the with the state of California, and it's about a 55-page document of items that are just exempt from sales tax. So we lose the revenue base from those purchases. And then one example that I like to use is Blu-ray discs versus Netflix. Many years ago, people used to buy Blu-ray movies. If you wanted to watch a movie, you'd go to Target and maybe you'd purchase the movie, put it in your Blu-ray player at home, and that's, you know, the movie purchase, even the gas that you use to drive to the location, and the Blu-ray player itself that you purchased are all sales tax revenue generators. Whereas now that everything is streaming, it's not taxed and it's a monthly subscription. I mean, you know, your kid putting an Eggo waffle in the Blu-ray player and breaking it, you know, would generate sales tax or just normal wear and tear. That just doesn't occur anymore. And we're starting to see, you know, the durable goods lessening in the purchasing. So going over the COVID impacts briefly, of course, as we've heard over and over the last year, the word unprecedented situation, and it's not really equal across all communities how it's hit. Our early predictions, quite frankly, were incorrect. This time last year, we were hoping that everything would open up again by June. We did not know that COVID would be a yearly or multi-year event. And our early predictions were that they would have picked up last fall. And so the changing conditions have really created additional uncertainty. And even though things are hopefully opening up in June, we really don't know, can't really predict some sectors how they're going to bounce back, in particular the hotel industry. So going into a little bit of our general fund revenue history here, I'd like to point out, you know, towards the bottom of the chart, these are our actuals. And you can see our property taxes stayed relatively flat, where in prior years they were going up prior to that economic downturn, some of the side effects that we saw from 2008. Our sales tax remained flat, and that was, we did lose in some sectors, and I'll go into that shortly. However, due to the online sales, we received a larger share of the county pool, and that actually helped us recover a net, draw even on that account. TOT tax, as I mentioned, we do have better numbers for that. It was overall the hotel stays. We lost 1.3 million last year. Franchise fees, I have an updated number on that. It's actually down by 500,000 from solid waste and others. They're just not picking up as much trash as they used to. I heard that there's some businesses that were picking up on a weekly basis moved to a model of we'll call you when the bin is full, and it would take a couple months until they were getting their trash picked up. I do have Q3 of our sales tax to show some of the dips and describe better what I just mentioned earlier. So our business and industry in Q3, it did rise with some of the business to business sales. As I mentioned before, our county and state pools also contributed to offset some of the losses that we had. Building and construction stayed relatively flat. A lot of people had time at home and noticed, hey, maybe I need to do some work on the backyard, or maybe I want to do a remodel, taking the time that they were home. So that stayed relatively flat. Same with general consumer goods. Restaurant and hotels, you can see the dip there for that one quarter, in particular hotels, with the hotels basically shutting down for a good 9 to 10 months. I did stay in contact with as many hotel managers as I could. Unfortunately, many of them were laid off for a good 9 to 10 month period. And at one point, we had several of our hotels that just had 3 employees, all security guards, working on rotating shifts to make sure nobody was breaking in. But I'm happy to report that they're opening back up and starting to see bookings again. So we're projecting that they should come back hopefully in the next year or so. Food and drugs remain flat. Autos and transportations about the same, and that's mostly our resale dealerships over there on San Ramon Valley Boulevard. And then you could see our drop in fuel and service stations. That was about a $200,000 drop overall over the year, with people just not driving as much. So this is a slide showing what we thought would happen and what actually happened when the 2021 budget was adopted in blue, and then our estimate came in at mid-year. So property tax, again, flat. Sales tax, we projected a drop, but then the online pool came in and saved us. This is that $1.3 million TOT hit is the next slide. The franchise fee hit at about 500,000. Charges for services really dropped. And that is people renting out facilities, our parks and recreation. That was about a $2 million hit from COVID. Our licensing and permits stayed flat. And then we have a miscellaneous category that were other miscellaneous fees at 1.5 million in a hit. So that's it for our challenges. I'm moving on to our strategies now about how we are looking at improving the situation moving forward, and just what we do with economic development in general. So we do have a plan, and we do have many plans. And I believe the Planning Commission, Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, at one point reviewed the retail analysis and the retail strategy and the EDSP.
Of course, yes.
Familiar with those documents. And I will go over, of course, those 3 are economic development plan element in the general plan. You will be updating that soon. And then also our economic development committee and other organizations. So moving on to some of the initial studies, I did mention our retail and also the alternatives evaluation report. And I'll go into some of the retail analysis findings. They did find that we are an affluent community, but we have significant retail leakage, as I mentioned earlier. Our demographics support additional retail, but we lack suitable sites on high traffic gravity side roadways. E-commerce, as I pointed out, is disrupting traditional retail, resulting in less space demand. And our existing retail centers are fully occupied, but with many non-retail tax generating tenants. It also identified that the city center at that point was well positioned to fill retail gaps and should be supported, which it has been. And then FAR incentives should be revisited to ensure mixed-use development with a new retail is feasible. And I believe some of those items were already adopted and completed. Moving on to a report sample. And if you haven't seen the report, we can definitely get you a copy of it. It looked at each of our retail nodes, and it provided some key implementing actions around some of the zoning to allow some mixed use, promoting certain uses, and also looking at revising parking standards to better reflect some of the current trends. Moving on to the retail strategy, this was approved by the council in May of 2018 and included the following goals: to strengthen our retail sector in San Ramon, expand retail and restaurants offerings locally, support specialty retail at the city center, and increase the tax base. And to support and implement the strategy, the city council amended the general plan in November of 2018, and included land use and zoning changes to encourage retail along high traffic and high visibility corridors, promoted housing in the core next to jobs, shopping and services, and actions to promote, to provide incentives, amenities, and events in shopping centers. And I neglected to zoom in, but I'll move over to the report example. They did provide examples of success stories. So this is Marin County Country Mart in Larkspur, and you can see the before and after pictures. And this really plays to the experience that people are looking for now when they go shopping. They do want to hang out, meet friends, experience live music, just have inviting spaces. And we're also seeing a little bit of that with COVID, with some of the outdoor dining, with people enjoying dining outdoors, and converting some of these spaces into just a little bit more of a relaxing environment. So they provided several examples with before and after pictures, and then there were actual outcomes and key policies, such as using conditional use permits to allow live entertainment and flexible use zones for outdoor activities. Moving on to the Economic Development Strategic Plan, the EDSP is organized into goals, strategies, and implementation actions. There are 4 overarching goals that serve as broad statements regarding the priorities. They're supported by 27 strategies that provide policies and methods for achieving those goals. And there's 52 implementation actions that provide specific initiatives for the city to undertake. I won't go through all 52 actions and goals and other priorities, but I do want to mention the 4 goals: to maintain and expand existing firms and attract new employers to San Ramon, maintain and strengthen San Ramon's fiscal vitality. Another goal is to maintain and enhance San Ramon's high quality of life. And the last goal is to implement key planning and development projects. Moving into an example of some of the strategies: improve and expand the base, focusing on shopping at City Center and east of I-680. Another example in the report is to retain and expand and attract retail's sales tax revenue generating businesses to San Ramon. Offer a range of housing types affordable to various income groups in the San Ramon workforce, and support the City Center to establish it as the heart of San Ramon. Going over to just a few of the actions: actively identify and implement opportunities to maximize sales tax generating uses on infill properties where we can. Continue to provide technical assistance and marketing support to community-led events, and continue our Bollinger Canyon Road improvements to facilitate access to Dory Valley and the city center. You need to make sure that the traffic is flowing in order for people to get to where they want to go in a convenient manner. Some of our supporting organizations, the EDAC and other organizations with economic development. Again, we have the EDAC, the San Ramon Chamber of Commerce, Contra Costa County Economic Partnership, Innovation TriValley, and Discover San Ramon. And I'll go over each of them briefly. The EDAC, and some of you have served as liaison to this committee, is a 13-member advisory body committee with 12 people appointed by the City Council. 1 representative is appointed by the San Ramon Chamber of Commerce, and their job is to recommend to the city programs to help stimulate business activity, retain existing businesses, facilitate expansion of existing businesses, and encourage new businesses to locate within the city. They're a great network when we need help. Just go out there, reach out to businesses, and assist us with whatever we are doing at the time. They do review commercial development plans and make comments to the city and developers on the project plans. And they also serve as an advocacy group for commercial developments that serve community needs and meet community standards. And they also communicate with the city and the community at large regarding affordable housing, economic development, and redevelopment projects and programs. Moving on to the Chamber of Commerce. I won't go over the mission and the focus, but the Chamber is an excellent resource. It's a great network for our businesses to figure out improvements and rely on each other if they need any assistance. I know it's been a great source of support during COVID, and we're very lucky to have such an active Chamber of Commerce in the city. Another one that I wanted to highlight, and not many people know about this group, it is the Contra Costa Economic Partnership. They are for lack of a better term, kind of a think tank organization that focus on wider issues such as land use and providing focusing documents regarding land use, workforce development, and infrastructure. And their latest publication is the Contra Costa County and TriValley Cities Point-to-Point Commuting Study. It was released in January of 2019. Commute patterns may have changed since then. So a little bit unfortunate timing, but it's still a very interesting read to see their recommendations on the commutes. Another group that we recently started participating in the last few years is the Innovation TriValley Leadership Group. If you're familiar with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, it's a similarly modeled group that brings together government, education, and local businesses to really promote the Tri-Valley. They produced a report called Tri-Valley Rising 2018. I'll send out a link to an electronic copy. It is a very interesting report showing that the Tri-Valley is a great place to do business. I hand this report out all the time whenever anybody is asking about statistics or some of the characteristics of the Valley. It shows our education level combined with a cheaper cost of living compared to Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And some of the recreation activities really make it a great place to conduct business. They do have a Vision 2040 plan coming out shortly, and you'll be hearing about that probably in about the next year. It's a little bit delayed due to COVID, but that report should be coming out shortly. This is just a screenshot of some of the major contributors and companies participating. We have Chevron, Bishop Ranch, both labs and Wells Fargo, some of the wineries, and all 4 cities plus the town of Danville. We participate in their subcommittee meetings and their monthly meetings with the group. So finally, the last group that I'd like to cover is Discover San Ramon. They are our Tourism Business Improvement District, or TBID. The board of directors consists mostly of hotel managers with a few other reps from local businesses. They charge a $2 fee per hotel night that goes into a fund that's dedicated towards promoting tourism in San Ramon. Now, it's a good news, bad news situation with Discover San Ramon in terms of where they were at prior to COVID. The bad news was after 5 years of being in existence and finally generating enough money to sustain a meaningful campaign. They developed a campaign, they presented to council, everybody was excited, they were just about to launch the campaign, and then COVID hit. The fortunate timing of that was much of the materials that were developed we're able to tweak that and launch a new campaign this summer. But also, it was fortunate that they didn't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the first round of media buys, only to have all of the hotels shut down a few months later. That literally would have been wasting money. So we're excited to have them back up and operating and looking forward to their campaign soon. And I believe that is the last slide. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Mr. Spadowski?
Question.
Vice Chair Kuznick.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Steve. It was a very informative presentation. Thank you so much. But I have a couple of questions, and some of it I've asked in other meetings. And as we are wrestling with this issue of retail that generates a sales tax, and then businesses that don't generate sales tax, has there been a discussion or an inkling or some other innovative way to change or amend what we charge taxes on? Like, for example, office spaces. One of the things that has really grown in this area is this mushrooming of tutoring sites, alternate education, Spanish, coding, martial arts, all those sorts of instruction-based. And perhaps there might be an opportunity to kind of figure out how to write a tax law for those kinds of things going forward, because they do seem to kind of skate on that issue.
Yeah, and that's something that we've always advocated for, is increasing the tax base. Of course, when you get into that discussion, that's at the state of California level, and it gets a little complicated with all of the House and the Senate trying to move forward on bills. The one area of hope that we are really focusing on is the online sales tax generation, how it's distributed. Because I don't have any data to support this, but I believe we do have a high level of deliveries in San Ramon as opposed to what our retail generation is locally. So we really do, we don't receive as much because of our lack of sites for that percentage to grow to get a larger slice of the online tax pool. So Senator Glazer is working on legislation. He started trying to introduce legislation to change that in 2018, and it didn't move forward. But now he has SB 792, and that is actually gaining a little bit of steam because of COVID. And some of the, for instance, Walnut Creek, they're seeing Neiman Marcus shut down, and they're saying, okay, what's going to open there? A Taco Bell? What are we going to be putting into this major retail location? And so I think more communities are willing to look at the online sales tax generation formula. Now, SB 792, it's a little bit of a baby step, but it's a critical one in that process, where the bill actually, the only thing that it does is it requires online retailers selling in California to provide the zip code information for each taxable sales. And it's not just the zip code information. We're pushing for the 4-digit code after the end of the zip code to make sure that we're keeping it to local. We can, because zip codes span cities. So hopefully when we're armed with that information, we'll see exactly how much we're generating, and other cities will notice that as well. And we'll have a majority that'll be able to push for some kind of recalculation of the code. So I know that's not your specific question, but I think our best chance at changing some of the calculations or increasing our taxable sales on existing businesses, that's the best shot that we have right now.
Okay.
Also, like to add to that too, is if you had noted in our city center approval and our projects going forward, we do require that they file developers do file permits with the state. So the sales tax from the purchase of construction materials actually will flow directly to the city and not go through the county pool. So we're really trying to help facilitate the increase in sales tax through those measures also.
Good job. Excellent.
Thank you. Do any of the other commissioners have questions for Mr. Spadowski?
Just a couple. First of all, excellent presentation. Thank you, Stephen. That was well done. And I apologize for the barking dog in the background. I was heartened to see that Heller's Jewelers was doing well over at the city center. And I didn't know if you have any insight into the other retailers there, at least in these last few months, how things are going as we come out of the doldrums.
Yeah, and this is something that I would like to do a little bit of further research, but some cities have reported that they've had more openings than closings over COVID. I think the shopping locations that have closed were struggling to begin with. And I know, I think the only one that closed over at the city center was the Papyrus paper store, but we've had several new openings over COVID, and many of the locations, Phil's Coffee line out the door. I've been able to squeak into Salt and Straw at like 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. But if I drove by this weekend with my daughter, because she's wanted to go now since they opened, and we were driving along the road, we could see that the line was stretching past Slanted Door. So I believe that it's doing very well. If you go on a Saturday or a Sunday, in particular with the farmers market, it's always packed. So it really is encouraging to see. It was a little bit of a slow start, and I know that there were some people saying, hey, when are all the shops opening? But it's really Bishop Ranch really does calculate who moves into each location carefully to make sure that they're going to stay there for a while.
That's good news. Thank you. Any insight as to, you mentioned that Discover San Ramon was going to be doing some media buys right before COVID. Are they ramping that up again? Do you know?
Yes, the board of Discover San Ramon just started meeting a few months ago, and fortunately, the media consultant that was hired to develop the campaign, they were able to pivot to a more appropriate campaign for our times. Basically the initial campaign was nothing compares in San Ramon, and we were promoting relaxing and disconnecting and getting away from it all, and doing nothing and relaxing. Well, we've done a whole lot of nothing over the last year, so they're shifting to another campaign that promotes our open space and our trails and some of the retail features in San Ramon. So they're in the process of tweaking that now, and it's cost efficient because they developed a lot of it beginning as a alternative plan. And so right now what they're doing is they're finalizing that campaign, and then they will this early summer, July-ish, start to roll out various media buys. So it'll be radio, advertising, just everything that you can think of. They're looking at it, several $100,000s that they're going to be spending, at least in the first quarter, with that initial push.
Great, thank you.
You're on mute, but I think you were calling on me.
Yep,
Stephen,
I missed the button there. I was trying to unmute myself.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Stephen, a couple of questions, and I know these came up at EDAC, and so thank you again for doing this for us. Has to do with real estate and how the city earns revenue related to property tax. And the first question was, we all know how real estate's going crazy in San Ramon. If you could connect the dots for us on how the city makes money. And then the second part of the question, we've approved a lot of projects recently having to do with housing, both inside Bishop Ranch and outside. Could you talk about how that helps with revenue to the city? That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. So in terms of the property tax, as you know, when a home sells, it's reassessed with the value, and now with Prop 13, it's basically a reset. So as we see a turnover in some of the home sales, that's where you see that property tax increase. The dip that you saw earlier in the chart was a little bit of an after effect from the economic downturn. Usually property tax lags behind in terms of either increasing or decreasing due to economic conditions, because of the home sales taking a little while and then registering and then getting reassessed. So we receive some revenue with that, and then we also get a property transfer fee that's associated with the sale of property. So we are starting to see the market heat up. The few real estate agents that I've talked to, people now with remote work, some of them are cashing in and moving elsewhere. And then those trying to leave San Francisco and Silicon Valley for more open space and more recreation opportunities, I'm hearing homes are selling within a week of being on the market and sometimes getting 200,000 over asking. I had a neighbor down the street, moving to Texas. They received 220K over asking. That's Livermore, not San Ramon, but it really is a hot market, and that turnover will generate revenue. In terms of the densities around Bishop Ranch, what we are looking forward to with some of the developments there is that walkability to retail and supporting our retail centers that are there with that additional population. So that's one of the keys. It's the walkability to work and to shopping that will really help support those businesses and locations. That's why the city center right now is 300,000 square feet of retail, and they're planning with that other promenade leading to the old AT&T building, adding another, I think it's 100 or 150 or so of retail. They've done their homework and they know the demand is going to be there. So it's the densities that will bring more foot traffic and support the businesses. So and decrease the car trips that are normally associated with that. So a little bit sad from an economic development standpoint that people aren't going to be driving as much, but I'm happy that they'll be walking and doing those purchases and supporting locally.
Thank you. Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, very good presentation, good graphics. In fact, my question is, can you send us an electronic version of your presentation so that we can really dig into the numbers? Again, I think it's not just a good presentation, but it's something that over time, I know I will be looking back at as I make future decisions. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I can send you a PDF copy, and I can also send you a hyperlink if you want to play with all the animations and move things around. But yeah,
I don't want that, but I'll take the first.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could, I think you could copy the rest of us on those links as well. I may want to play with the graphics if my computer gets bored. I'd also like to get links from you for the relevant stuff on the Contra Costa Economic Partnership and Innovation TriValley Leadership Group. The latter sounds very much like the TriValley Business Council used to be in the early 2000s and 2010s. Same idea. They ran into hard times and sort of folded about 10 years ago, but the concept is pretty much the same. So thank you very much for and we'll certainly circle back at points in time to get some additional information on some of the projects in the town. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Okay, at this point, do we have any commissioner liaison reports? See shaking heads left to right, not up and down. I do have one and might be of interest to you. I attended the Housing Advisory Committee meeting at the end of April, where they presented what used to be called BR6 and now has got the spiffy name of City Village. The interesting thing for us is that in the course of the presentation, the developer mentioned that for some strange reason, they decided that they would look into making a series of small parks within the boundaries of City Village. And so instead of relying on one park at the corner of Executive Parkway and Camino Ramon, they are going to keep that, but they're also going to have right this time, they're looking at 4 different smaller parks scattered throughout the development. So I guess a birdie must have whispered into the ear at some point in time. So that's probably something we will see when the City Village comes back in front of us. So I just wanted to mention that so that people do listen to what we have to say at these concept reviews. So, okay, so at this point, Mr. Barr, could you give us some coming attractions?
Certainly. So on May 18th, we have the Bridges Deck Edition continued public hearing. So we'll be coming back in response to the last public hearing. Also, we have a concept review for Belmont Village. That's a senior care facility that's being contemplated for the Bishop Branch 1A site within the City Walk Master Plan area. It's part of that neighborhood south of Bollinger Canyon Road, adjacent to the Bishop Branch 1. So we'll have some information and a presentation for you on that.
Okay, thank you. At this point, do you have any predictions for a meeting in early June?
We're still working on our scheduling. We have a couple of things that it's just a question of timing and when things will be ready. So nothing to report right now.
Okay. All right, thank you. Unless anybody else has some comments they want to make, let's adjourn the meeting.